Hello friends, welcome to Code Heaven. So in this video series, we've been making a project related to crowdfunding. So in my last video, we made uh, entities and relationship between entities. We've created database, we've added entity framework. So we'll continue from that. In today's video, we'll make some endpoints and we'll make some repositories. We'll make generic repositories connect to our database. We'll make some services and we'll display data through API in the Swagger. So that's what we're going to do today. So if you run this application, you can see Swagger in here. If you try executing it, you can see that it's saying congratulations, your app is running. So this is coming from this endpoint. Our program.cs, if you go to program.cs in our crowdfunding app, so here this is the place where we map our endpoint. So it's all right to put our endpoints in here. Previously in our MVC based application, we would map the endpoints in our controller. We would make controllers and we would make methods in the controllers, and we would map the endpoints like get, push, or delete into the controllers, and whatever the request is made from the client side, it will get redirected to the methods of the controller. But in this minimal API, we can just add our methods in here on our application. But if we continue to work this way, this program.cs would go very large. So it's better if we separate these endpoints to a different file. So that's what we are going to do today. Let's make a different endpoint and start adding from there. So at first, let's make a folder called endpoints. And inside endpoints, what we'll be doing is we'll be adding some the classes that we need. For example, let's say we will be needing for example, let's say a campaign. Let's make a campaign endpoint. So let's create a class. And call this endpoint as campaign endpoint. And inside campaign endpoint, we'll make a constructor, and inside constructor, we'll have a URL. So this URL would be a base URL. And you know what? I think since there will be many base URLs, we should be making a base endpoint as well. So let's create a class for base endpoint. Let's create a project structure. So let's use public string base URL is equal to, let's say, /API/v1. And let's create a method which could be overridden by the base classes. Let's say map endpoints. Web application app. Now this our child endpoint will inherit from base endpoint like this. And so, and every child endpoint will have their own endpoint. So we'll make public string URL. So this URL will be this you will be adding base URL in here, which will be common from the base endpoint, which we get from the base endpoint. Remember, we're using the concept of inheritance in here, one of the feature of the object-oriented programming. So this base URL is coming from this parent class. Now we'll be using this is the endpoint URL that will be hitting by the clients. So it will be, so let's call this as campaigns. campaigns. So as soon as this endpoint is loaded, this constructor will get loaded first, and this constructor will make this URL base URL plus campaign. Base URL is API/v1. So whenever a client queries for API/v1 campaigns, then it will be redirected to this method, this controller here. So let's override our map endpoints method that we created in the base class here. And in here, what we'll be doing is we'll be calling the classes methods that's required. We'll be creating methods in here. So let's delete this one. Let's app dot, so we want map get. So so we could manually write something like API/v1/PAI campaigns, but like we will have to write the same piece of code for many different methods, like endpoints, like app.mapget, app.post, put, delete. So to remove that redundancy, we'll be using this URL instead of this one. And so whenever by default it's calling for campaigns, then we'll make a method called get all. And if we put control and dot, we can create a method from here, get all. And in this get all method, Just delete this HTTP context. We don't need this one. We don't need this one as well. Here, in the task will our return type will be I result. In get all, we'll have to inject our repositories. For now, let's just say return results. Okay. Hello from campaigns. Since this is a task, let's make this async. Okay. So, but in this, by default in minimal API, it has very limited APIs. So we need to, if you run this application, the Swagger, in Swagger, this endpoint is not coming out. It's just only slash get. We need slash camp API slash v1 slash campaigns. So to make this come over in Swagger, we'll have to make some changes. We'll have to call this class, call this campaign map endpoints class in our program.cs class. So we'll have to add this in here. So map endpoint. So one thing around says that since we'll have many endpoints in here, for example, one for campaign endpoint, another for user endpoint, another for like, so there'll be many endpoints. If you keep on adding in these endpoints in our program.cs file, this class will get too long. Okay? So there's a better way of doing that. So that's why we'll be making our routing class. Let's say, let's make a routing class. Let's call this, let's make a new folder called add. Let's make a new folder called extension. We'll make an extension class. Let's call this class as map endpoint routing. In this class, let's make one static class, static method, map the endpoints. So we'll be using scopes now. Let's say using var scope equal to app dot services dot create scope. Var services is equal to scope dot service provider dot get service. So we need best endpoint here. So best endpoint. So we need instance of the best endpoint. So we'll look through all the services that are registered under base endpoint. So remember, base endpoint is a base class. So if we look through these services, we'll be looking through all the child classes that this base endpoint is inheriting from. So all the child classes which is inheriting from this base endpoint will come in the services, and we'll look through these services and we will register them. I don't service dot map endpoints map. This public, there's something wrong. Service, it says services of type. So let's figure out what this issue is. At first, there's something wrong in here. It's just coming as a base endpoint. Actually, it should be a list of base endpoints. There's something wrong, and let's check out in here base endpoint. Let's rename this. Let's make this capital P. Let's rename this to capital P first, and then it should automatically be renamed in here. The web services for the scope. Yeah, it should be something like this. Something is wrong in here. Let it paste this. Okay, now it's coming as I new member. Okay. For services scope, your service provider that gets services. Okay, so it's not just service, right? It should be services. Now it's working. Right. So don't forget to put S, just make this plural, get services. Okay. Now we need to call this method from our program.cs file. So in our program.cs file, just after this map get map endpoint routing dot map endpoints and app. So when you call this method, what happens is if you go into just press F12 here and go inside this application, it will get all the services that's linked with this base endpoint. So one would be like this campaign endpoint. So if we make anything that's inherit from here, all those lists will come in here, and we'll just add this service, map this service with this app, web application. So you will get a register in here. So that is just like app.mapget. So this app we are sending in here, and and since we are calling this map endpoint, so whatever has overriding here is map app, and we'll get map get, and we'll call this method here. So this is just like calling this part from, if you copy and paste this part in here. So we could just say app.mapGet is route, and we can call method from here as well. But instead of calling this from here, we're calling this from here. Okay. And if you go to campaign, we will be registering this method inside a program from here. So we're doing this over long and complex process so that this our program file will not be overcrowded, and we'll be making a separate reusable codes in our separate files. That's the reason of doing this one. Guys, I hope you understand what we're doing. Now, if we run this application, and if you go to this Swagger, if you refresh this Swagger, it's still not coming. Let me see. Okay, so there's one more thing that we have to do. What we have to do is we will have to register the dependencies over here. So let's add some dependencies. We'll have to register the dependencies of these best endpoints in here. So it will be builder.services.add scoped. What we will be adding is our best endpoint. We'll have to know this dependency injection system that this endpoint is mapped with our campaign endpoint. Okay, now it should be working. But remember, guys, since we're adding this one later on, so we'll have to add services endpoints like this in many places. So this program.cs file will be very long, so we'll have to take this into another file as well. But first, let's check if this is working or not. Okay, now it's coming. There is some typo, but at least it's coming now. Now if you try again, it says hello from campaign, so it's working. Let's try to fix this typo. If you go to campaign endpoint, I think we should put slash in here as well. Or we can put slash. If you put slash in here and rerun this application. Let's refresh this application. Now it's copying properly. As you can see, we have successfully created a new endpoint. We have also made a very solid architecture. We have separated its classes into their separate files. So we have organized our project architecture as well. So endpoints are, so we'll having all the endpoints in here. So there's a single one place where we will map all these endpoints, and we'll be using registering the services. For this service, we'll have to add this into a different file as well, because there will be a lot more. We'll have registered like this. There will be a lot more of these services coming. So this program.cs file will have too many of these services. So let's put this service into a different file as well. Let's just make a new folder, add a new folder inside this crowdfunding, add new folder. Let's just call this as a configure dependency. Watching this also will be an extension class. Let's delete this one. We can just make a new class in this extension class, because that configure dependency will also be an extension class. The DPE and DEM's configure dependency, and inside configure dependency, we'll make this a static class. Public static. Let's make a static method called configure dependencies. This I remember, guys, we are making an extension class. That's why to make this, we'll need this keyword to make this as an extension class. Services. Now, services dot add scope. Now, whatever we've been doing in program.cs file, we can just cut this part, press Ctrl and X, and this whole line will be cut, and we can now paste this in here. Just remove this pillar part, yeah, and make this small. So now this there's some error in here. This is not available in this context. Let's try to figure out what's going on in here. So we'll have to make it void, since the return type is void in here. Now we'll have to call this method program.cs file. So it should be builder dot services dot configure dependencies, and that's it. So since it's an extension method, we can just call this method by using dot. Okay. And this service will come in here as from this character, and it will just add this, map this endpoint with its child endpoint as it will be a scope instance. Now, if we run this application, we should get the endpoints. Okay, now if we refresh this, we're still getting the endpoints. Yep, we're still getting the endpoints. So it's working properly. So now our project structure is getting a shape. So we have different endpoints. We'll have different endpoints in this endpoint folder. We'll have extension classes in this extension folder. So our middlewares will be in this program.cs file. This is the file which runs in the beginning whenever our application runs. We have different layers for our database related database context classes are in this data file, while our entities, our models are in this domain domain project library, and this is in our data library. So our project, we're giving a good shape to our project structure. So now what we'll have to do now is we'll also have to add a repository so that we can get data from our database. So let's make a repository for our campaign class. Since we already have an entity in our database, let's make a repository. But we'll be making a generic repository this time. So let's for repository, let's create repository into a separate layer, just like this data and domain, so that it can be reused from other projects as well. For example, currently we are just using this minimal API project. Later on, if we decide to make another MVC project or another desktop or console application project, if we make this repository into a separate layer, so they can easily, these layers can easily be reusable into those projects as well. That's why we're going to make repository into a separate layer as well. So let's right click the solution and add new project and add class library. Let's call this repository. Now, but let's go back. Let's create okay, that's fine. I was thinking to create a folder, but since we haven't made a folder before, so that should be fine. Let's just add a new project, class library. Let's call this repository. And next, let's make dotnet7. Okay, now class 1 has come. So inside, let's rename this class 1, press F, and let's call this repository. Now inside this repository, since we'll be making a generic, let's make it of type T. This type will be this type will come as dynamically. So for campaign, we must send this type as campaign. For other type, for example, if you go to comment or donation, we'll have to send comment donation from wherever we are calling this repository. So we'll need to make iRepository interface of type T. Currently, we don't have this iRepository where T is of type class. Instead of class, we'll make this base entity. Since we have a base entity, this reference to domain where we have base entity. And to save the timer, let me just copy this code from my other application. So these are the generic terms. Okay. So what we'll have is this application DB context. This will come from our data. Let's add reference to data. So what we'll do is we'll make a constructor called repository and inject this application data context, DB context. And this context will add a variable called context where with the help of this context, we'll get all the data from the database. And we'll also make a DB set. We'll set this to a specific type so that when we want to get data of some specific type like campaign or comment, then we can just use this DB set. So this get all method is to get all the data of this specific type. Then we can get all, this is queryable, and then we can also get all enumerable type. And this gets single async to get specific data, add async to insert data into database, get async. And this is again to insert data into database. Then we have update async to update the data in the database, and then at last we have delete async to delete the data in the database. Right. You can pause this screen and then just go and then type these methods one by one. Okay, guys. I'll also be sharing my source code to my subscribers. Guys, if you haven't subscribed my channel already, please subscribe and type in the email in the comment section so that I can share you my source code. So I'll be sharing my source code to only those users who have subscribed to my channel and type in the emails in the comment section. I'll send you my source code in the email. Then let's create a repository interface. So if we go into repository and let's just create an interface here, new class, I repository. Let's make this public. And in this repository, I repository, we'll have all the methods that we have created in here. But we don't want this, it will only have the structure of this method. So let me copy this from, okay, guys, so it should be this one, I repository of type G. So it should be not class, it should be interface. Yeah. If you pause the screen, you can type this. Otherwise, if you have subscribed my channel, I'll just send you this source code. Now it should be working. So now this is a generic repository. Now we can inject this repository into our endpoint and we can get all the related data from our database. But before injecting this to our endpoint, what we should do is we should register this into our configure dependency method. So let's register this. Let's call this services dot add scope Let's type of, let's register our generator repository in here. Repository. REPO. Repository. Okay. Now we'll need to add reference to repository. Type of repository. Okay, so it's this one. Like this. Okay. So type of, not this one. Okay. So services.add scope type of IR repository. So whenever an IR repository is called, then we'll get this get instance of this concrete class repository. Okay. Now what we can do is we can add this. We can either directly add this repository into our endpoint. Where's my campaign endpoint here? What we can do is we can just add this endpoint. So in .NET7, what we can do is we can also inject this objects into the methods. So before we could only inject in the constructor, now we can do that in the methods as well, like this. But this would be of type campaign. So here, what we can do is repository dot get all response is equal to, and then we can just return this response to the client. So if we run this application, let's, so this is an async, this is coming as task. Get all async. Let's just call get all async for now. And await this. Now if we run this application, if we have any data into the database, then it should come. But if you don't have any data, then it will not come. It will just come as null. Because if you run this application, so it's just coming now. Let's put a debug point in here. Now if we execute, you see, as you can see, we're getting an instance of this repository. We're getting DB set and context. We're getting DB set of type campaign, but context, where we'll get all the types in the context. And the response, now we don't have any data in the database. That's response is, so we're getting an empty array at the moment. Similarly, we'll also make all the Crud applications here. Let's make a create application so that when we make this get, call this get method next time, we'll get some data. Let's make let's make a create application next. So now we've made one get application. Let's make a save application, save method as well. So let's copy this app.map get, and instead of get, let's make post one. The URL would be the same, and in the post word, let's make a save method. Save method. Yes. And let's create this method save and remove this HTTP context. Let's make a return type of iResult, and let's inject this repository here, and let's put comma in here, and we need a type, something like campaign. We can either put this whole campaign here, but in this campaign there are many properties. So the properties that we need from clients are like title, description, goal amount, current amount raised, start date, and end date. But we don't need these like GYD created and updated at. So clients don't need to send those properties to us. So let's create a DTO. So for DTO as well, let's create a DTO in a separate class. Let's create it in our domain, and inside here let's add a new folder called let's stop this application DTOs, and inside DTO let's add a new class. Let's call this campaign request DTO. And in this campaign request DTO, whatever inside the campaign need these all these probably we don't need this user as well, so only this part. We need this part. We'll make one campaign response DTO as well to send the response back to the user. But for now, campaign request DTO should be fine. Now let's put campaign campaign request DTO, campaign request in here. Now the response is going to await repository dot. So we'll need to save this. Let's I think what was the create? Okay, we need to create and let's send this whatever that user has sent in here. Okay. So, but since this is of type DTO, but we can't send DTO type in here. We need a type of campaign. okay, not campaign request. So we need to convert this detail into a campaign. So one way to do that is we create a new instance of campaign and add map like this comments is equal to campaign request dot comments. Where is the comment? Okay, so we forgot to bring in comment in here. Let's add comment in here. So campaign request dot comment. Let's make it plural in here as well. So we'll have to put all this one by one. So instead of doing this, what we can do is we have a better way. For comments. Okay, so we don't need comments actually in here. It is just a list. So let's delete this comment in here from here. So instead of doing this one by one, what we can do is we can add automapper. There's one library called automapper, which would map data from this type to another type if their properties are same. Okay. So for that, we'll need to go to NuGet package manager, and then we'll need to add automapper. So let's go to tools, NuGet package manager, not this one. Tools, NuGet package manager, manage NuGet package for solutions, and browse for automapper. So the one we are looking for is this one, automapper.extensions.microsoft.dependency injection. Let's add the latest version into this project, crowdfunding. Let's install this. So now let's check if our automapper is installed or not. Let's go to dependencies and packages. As you can see, automapper is here. You can also double this crowdfunding here and see automapper has been installed. Now, what we'll have to do is we'll make a new folder, and we make a new class called profile where we'll map each details with its corresponding campaigns. So let's make a new folder called profile. Remember guys, this project structure that I'm making is already a production ready one. So if you guys go to any companies, software companies, and later on if you have to work on the code that I've made is already a production ready one. So you can apply this into your real world application as well. So let's make a class called mapping profile. So this class now will implement profile. This profile comes from let's import This profile should come from AutoMapper class. It's not important. Okay, so I can see what's wrong here. It's getting conflict from this profile. So let's not make this, let's make these profiles instead, because our compiler is getting confused between this profile and AutoMapper profile. So let's make this profiles, and now let's use AutoMapper. You should be using AutoMapper in here. Now what we'll have to do is inside here, let's create a constructor CTOR and double tap, and here we need create map, and from request. So whenever we want to convert this TTO into our entities, then it goes from always it goes from left to right. So we'll have to put campaign request TTO in here. This means we are converting this DTO to our campaign. So sometimes you might get a situation where you want to convert campaign from campaign to request TTO. In this situation, in that situation, you will have to put this campaign in the left side and this request TTO in the right side. Okay. But usually when you want to convert this campaign to this, it should be a response later on. But for now, let's just delete this for now. We don't need that at the moment. We'll create that whenever we need it. Okay. For now, this should be fine. Now, after creating that, we'll also need to like register this AutoMapper into our dependency. So let's go to extension and configure dependency. You know what? Let's just go to program. That's here. And inside program, that's here. Let's add just after configure dependency builder dot services dot add auto mapper, and let's let configuration such that dot add profile, and we'll add this mapping profile class that we just created. This one. Let's copy this and paste this in here. So we are telling this our dependency injection system that whenever AutoMapper is called, let's use this mapping profile method class to map these objects with the corresponding objects. Okay. Now, if we go to map endpoints, so we don't need to map these map these properties one by one. What we'll do is, what we can do is like let's say var entity is equal to we'll need to inject this mapper actually. Let's get underscore mapper here as well. Like, let's call this we can either inject this in here or we can also inject that in here, since we'll be using this mapper instance in most of our methods. So let's do this in our constructor so that it will be reusable. Let's just call this as I mapper. Let's use this button to auto create this field of the mapper. And here let's call for mapper dot map. Yeah, and this one campaign. So here what it's doing is we are getting of type campaign. So you can also put this campaign request feature just like this in here. Campaign request in here. It's saying the campaign request to entity search campaign, because campaign request is not null here. Okay, campaign request. For some reason, it's saying campaign request is not null. Now, this campaign request would be converted into this campaign, and then now we can send this entity in create async. Okay. But another thing that we need to do is entity. We need to add is created at date time dot now and entity dot updated at. So these are coming from our base class. We need to add this created and updated at as well. This GUID, it will be created because we are calling this in the constructor, so it will be created itself. Now we are creating a new entity. Now it's also asking for a response for now. So what we can do is we can return this response, but we don't want to send all the campaign information there. So we'll create a new response DTO. Just similar to campaign DTO, let's make it as response DTO, campaign response DTO. But in this case, it looks like this all will be same, but there will be sometimes there will be situations where this the properties would be different in request and response. So let's create a standard that will make a different details for request and response. Now, once we create a response, we'll also need to put that in our mapping profile. So this time, this campaign would be on left, and here it will be campaign response DTO. We're converting campaign to response this time. So here underscore mapper dot map So we're converting from campaign to campaign request video response. Yep, and that's it. So it's saying, can you receive convert request to result? I'm missing a cast. So we can't directly send return this type, need a return of results type. So we need, what we need is, let's put this into a variable. No, so define return results dot, let's say created dollar, say where, let's tell the client where we have created this endpoint. Let's say slash campaign slash response dot id and comma this part. So what we are doing is we created the campaign from here, and then we're returning this type, response DTO type, and in this one is just to inform that this is the URL where you can check if this ID is created or not. But we need to create this endpoint as well. So we'll need to make an endpoint just to get this campaign by ID. Let's just make an endpoint called get by ID. And it will also have our repository type campaign. But this time it's not just a URL. We'll have URL slash ID as well. Slash ID. Let's put dollar. There's a URL slash ID. So whenever there's URL, it should be a get method and get fork. So whenever there's a get fork with URL slash ID, it will go to this get by ID method. And this get by ID, we need GUID as well. The ID would usually be of type GUID. Let's create UID type ID. So whenever they put ID in here, This ID will come in here. And then we'll look for underscore repository. It's the repository dot get single async and we'll just put this ID in here. Var response is equal to so now if this response is null, we'll just return results dot not found. Not found will return 4 status code. I think this will be of type I result. This is a task. We should make this async as well. If it's not null, then we'll just send return results dot okay. Okay will return with status code 200 and then data or whatever is came from here. We also need to avoid this. Get right, it will be single get. So now let's run this code. Hopefully everything is working. Now if we refresh this Swagger, as you can see, we've got 3 more endpoints. One is campaigns, one is post campaign, one is get by ID. Now let's create an endpoint. Let's create a campaign. Let's say need money for refugees. Let's just put the same thing in description for now. Goal amount, let's say 1,000. Current amount, let's say 50. Started and ended should be fine. Ended, we can just increase this ended. Now if we create execute, now it's saying there's some issue. It's saying response status is 500. There's some inner user ID. Column does not allow null. So there is no user ID. Oh, now I remember what's wrong. So we haven't mapped the user ID in here. We are not sending user ID from this request because we are not sending user ID from here. We need to get the user ID. So whoever has logged in, we need to get that user ID. So currently we haven't created our user login registration system. We'll create that in our next video. So for now, we'll just put user ID. We'll just manually, so instead of this user ID here, user ID. User ID, we'll just put test for now. Okay. So let's execute that same code again. Okay, now the insert conflict with foreign key. and it's the same user ID error with ASP.NET users column ID. So what's happening is in our ASP.NET users, let's stop this application. If we go to our database, let's connect to our database. Let's connect via SQL Server. Probably, since this user is not created, we and this user ID are related. There's reference between user and campaign, so we need that exact user ID that's been created. So at first we need to create a user before saving a campaign. Then okay, although users are not created, so first we need to create user, then only we can save this. So for that we need to create a user. So since this video is getting too long, I'll create users in our next video. Till then, see you in the next video. And guys, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe this video. And see you on our next video where I'll make how to make the registration login system as well. Okay, see you on the next video. Bye.